everyone, welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, my name's Charlotte and this channel is all about myself and my family adventures, usually to Orlando, Florida, to Walt Disney World, Universal Studios, SeaWorld, all over. We love it. The channel's also a little bit about lifestyle. I do these chatty vlogs, so welcome. Today's video is all about travelling to Orlando with children, be that babies, toddlers or kids a little bit older. And if you enjoyed today's vlog, please do be sure to subscribe, give it a like, because it really helps our little channel grow. Thank you guys for watching. So if you're not familiar with the channel, I'll give you a little bit of a background into why I'm filming this vlog today. So I've been traveling to Florida for the last kind of 10 years or so as our annual trip, or sometimes biannual, you know, however it falls. I've got quite a lot of experience. I've been quite lucky over the years, and my daughter has also been coming along with us ever since she was 7 months old. On her first trip, she was a little baby. She has been through her toddler years and now as a little bit older of a child as well. So I thought I would sit down and talk to you guys about my experience traveling with Paisley over all of those years, the tips and the tricks that I've learned along the way, and any little things that may be able to help you guys, especially if you're planning a Florida trip. So I've got kind of a lot to say here, but I am going to try and keep this video kind of short and snappy and just throw in all them tips and tricks that I've got along the way. I'm going to break it into sections, and the first section I want to talk about is packing and the actual travel day itself. So if you're not from the UK like us, you may not be aware that it's approximately a 9-hour flight to get to Orlando, which is, it's a long old slog, especially if you have little children. Being in a confined space for that amount of time can be tricky, but we've learned to deal with it along the years, and it's only got easier, to be honest. Every time we've travelled, Paisley has surprised me with how well she's done, how easy it's actually been. And I think as parents, we do tend to worry about these things a bit more than we probably need to, but just relax, you're gonna be fine. It's 9 hours. It may seem like a long time, but in the grand scheme of things, it's so worth it. And like Paisley, your kids will probably surprise you and enjoy the flight and be as good as gold. But before we even get to that flight, we need to pack. So whether it be for a week vacation, 2 weeks, 10 days, 3 weeks if you're very, very lucky, however long, we need to pack before we go, obviously. And what I've always done from when Paisley was a baby on her very first trip is pack absolutely everything. I'm an overpacker rather than an underpacker, and I very much like to be organised and prepared for every scenario and take everything from home. So I know that there are obviously shops and supermarkets in Orlando. You have Walmart, you have Publix, you have Target, what have you, but I've always taken things like nappies with us, her wipes when she was a baby, her formula, because as I said, on her first trip she was only 7 months, so she was still drinking formula, snacks, everything. I've taken it all from home, and back in the day that did result in some very, very heavy suitcases. But at least I knew I had everything I needed for that whole trip. And then if we did need anything else, we could go and get it. But the basics were there. And in my mind, that made me rest assured that we didn't have to get there and go and find formula real quick. We had everything we needed and we were ready to go. I mentioned heavy bags before, and usually if you are traveling with an airline such as British Airways or Virgin Atlantic, children under 2 years old do get their own suitcase, so equivalent to what you would get, which is usually 23 kilograms, which is a pretty decent amount of luggage to be able to take. The baby gets that as well, and you can take 2 additional items. So that could be a car seat or a stroller, for example. And I've always done that as well. We've always taken those things from home, just so we have exactly what Paisley's familiar with. The worst thing would be to get somewhere and go and perhaps buy diapers or nappies, and when a baby's that young, you don't know if their skin is going to tolerate them, because they're obviously, things are different between the UK and the US, and babies have sensitive skin, so there's always that to consider. The same with formula. Although things may be very, very similar if not the same, personally I found it better to stick to what I knew. And in terms of formula, we would always take these small Aptamil bottles of milk. By the time we went, they were perfect for her. She was usually having those at home anyway. They can be drunk at room temperature, which she quite often did, and that worked really, really well. There were a lot of them for like a 2-week trip, but what I would do is split them across the 3 suitcases, and then if we needed extra, you can do an order into Boots, or I don't know if anywhere else does similar, where you can order them on the air side of the airport, so you don't have to worry about the liquids and things like that. You just go, you do the online order, pick it up, and that's your hand luggage essentially to take on the airplane, which is brilliant. And whilst at the airport as well, at the bigger airports such as Gatwick and Heathrow, I know that there is a family lane to go through as you're going through security and checking in, so it's a little slower paced and it takes the pressure off, especially when you're going through with a pram and they have to check under the pram, in the pram, open everything, go through all the packages of your bag, which if you've got young kids, you'll know you don't travel lightly. So going through the family specific area tends to make it a little bit less daunting, a little bit less of a stressful experience, because you don't feel like you're holding anybody up. Everybody understands and everybody's in the exact same boat. My next tip, and this goes for the flight itself, park days, being at your resort, across the board, is just to be prepared. Be prepared for absolutely everything that you can be. So we have always taken, and still to this day, in our bag we will take entertainment items for Paisley. So when she was a baby, it may have been little rattles or Sophie Giraffe, cardboard books to read and for her to like play with. And as she's gotten older, she's taken things like her iPad, her Switch, colouring. You could take a little colouring book and just some pencils, something that if your child is sitting for a long amount of time, for example on the plane or in a long queue, you can just whip out the bag and make a bit of light entertainment to help pass the time and to keep their little minds occupied and happy, and that's always helped us an awful lot. Another thing that we were always sure to take plenty of, especially when Paisley was a lot younger, was her dummies. If you're in the US, I think you call them pacifiers over there, but they're not the same there and here. So I remember on one trip very vividly, she was about a year and a bit old and she had her dummy a lot. I think she was teething and she was just happier with her dummy. We must have taken 30 dummies and she would sit in that little pram, chuck them out, and at the end of the day we'd be like, where did all the dummies go? Like, they're all gone. And the Disney resort shops are actually very good, and they do tend to have dummies, but they're different, and you would think a baby wouldn't know the difference between a UK Tommy Tippy dummy or a US dummy, but they absolutely do, and they let you know about it as well. So something we always thought was quite helpful was having a clip, and we would clip the dummy clip onto perhaps the strap of her pushchair, and the dummy would just stay on there, so she might try and throw it, but she would not be able to. So if you've got a little kid who has a dummy, make sure you've got a couple of good dummy clips, just so they're not all going astray throughout your trip. In our park bag, we would always take snacks, and that's changed over the years. So Paisley used to have like the kiddie snacks, like the fruit bakes and the fruit gummy worms and things. Now it's a bit easier that she's older. We might take an apple or a packet of crisps or whatever she might fancy, but I always make sure there's plenty of snacks in the park bag, because if your child is hungry, my child anyway, and me to be fair, we get hangry. Like, you can see a change in behaviour if you're getting peckish and they just need to be fed, and you're in the heat all day, you're walking a lot, snacks are very important. And with ourselves, we found that buying snacks within the parks, one, it's very expensive, and two, they're not always the healthiest choice for young children. So there is fruit available in every park, but in terms of snacks, there's not a lot else that healthy from my mind. So there's popcorn, there's cupcakes, things like that in Starbucks, there's fries, but it's not that easy to come across a semi-healthy packet of crisps, like a packet of Skips or something, for example, or little kids' fruit gummies that they might have. So we've always had that with us. Again, it works as a distraction if you're in a queue and your child is feeling a little bit restless. I might say, hey, you want a snack? Because who doesn't want a snack? We'd also be sure that our park bag had a medical kit in every single day. So we'd have the small Calpol sachets, a couple of those, plasters, things like sun cream, hairbrush always, not that that's medical, but it's just a really good thing to have in your bag. And yeah, just anything you may well need. And I have never had to go to first aid for anything at the parks until our most recent trip, which I'll talk about in a minute, because we've always had this park bag, and it's inevitable. You're going to get blisters. You're walking a lot. If it's a smaller child, they may be in their pram a lot, so they may not experience blisters, but as they get older and they're walking a bit more, even if they're in the comfiest pair of shoes, it's a lot of walking. So plasters or band-aids, if you're in America, come in really, really handy. As I say, on our last trip, we did have to visit first aid. Paisley fell over as we were coming off of Dumbo. She grazed her knee, and it was a large area, so the plasters I had weren't quite big enough. We went to first aid. They gave us one like this big. It covered her whole kneecap, and they were just brilliant. So if you do ever have any first aid needs and don't have what you need on you, head to first aid, because they're amazing. They're all trained. I think they said they were all nurses or paramedics, so they're brilliant. They were so friendly, so good with Paisley, and yeah, I'd be very, very happy, and I would feel safe to use Disney first aid again. And something else I would always be prepared with would be clothes. So in our park bag, I would even take 2 or 3 spares. So Paisley would have her outfit for the day on, especially when she was little. Things get messy, like drink goes down them everywhere, snacks are everywhere, you've got sun cream going on clothes, you've got all sorts going on. But I would take a lot of spares in the bag, even if you just need a quick t-shirt change. It's nicer than them having to potentially sit in a damp t-shirt or something for a little while, because it's just not nice, is it? And we wouldn't want to do that. So we also are aware that there are water fountains and things like splash pads, I should call them, not fountains, but the splash pads that little kids are very, very, very interested in. So whenever we'd see a splash pad, Paisley would just run, and she would be in the splash pad having so much fun and be absolutely drenched. We wouldn't have the chance to say, just go in a little bit. Nope, that kid was all in. And yeah, it's just always good to have a spare pair of clothes, maybe even a small towel if your bag's big enough, and yeah, you're covered for all bases then. The third section I'd like to talk about is your pram or stroller. So I mentioned that we'd always take our own, but there's a few things I've learned along the way that having the pram or the stroller is really, really good for. One of which being the underneath basket. We would pack that with like the big backpack, so we didn't have to hold it. We would take very cold bottles of water from our room, because the water in these parks is upwards of $5. So even if you can take a bottle each of water, you're going to save a lot of money by having them under that pram. Other things I would recommend in terms of your pram or stroller is to make sure you have a rain cover. We all know that Florida is quite a stormy state, and I learnt the hard way. So we were in line for Pirates of the Caribbean, which is indoors, so you don't know what's going on outside, but our pram was in stroller parking. We were only gone for about half an hour. Sunny when we went in. We came out and the pram was soaked. There'd been like a shock storm, 20 minutes or so, poured with rain. We had a wet stroller that we then couldn't use. So just think, perhaps keep an eye on the weather, and if it is potentially going to rain, then maybe put your rain cover over before you go and leave your pram out in the open to get drenched like I did. Other little things that I would take for the pram to make it comfortable and lovely for P would be a cup holder that would clip on, so she could just have her drink there all the time. You can get clip-on fans which are USB chargeable or battery operated. Clip it onto the hood and it keeps them nice and cool while they're sat in there. Likewise, I would take a blanket for the evenings, because some of the times we went, so we've been there in November before and February, and the evenings have been a lot chillier. So it's always good to have a blanket, even if it's warm during the day. It might help them have their little nap as it moves more into the evening darkness and it does get a bit cooler. And most importantly, remember to put something on that pram that is going to be easy to spot. So with stroller parking at Walt Disney World, there are hundreds of strollers all in a line, and a lot are the same. You might think you have a unique stroller, but you could go there and there may be 5 that are exactly the same. Like, oh my gosh, which is mine? So we would always just put a bit of ribbon around the handle, or even put a sticker on it, or you can get a proper name badge and like stick it onto the back somehow. I know that when you rent the stroller at the Disney or the Universal parks, they do put like a name card in the back. That's a good idea. And just on those strollers as well, quickly, we have had experience with them, and whilst they're very, very good, especially for older children, so we used one a lot when Paisley was around age 5. We didn't take a pram. We weren't sure whether or not she'd need one, but her little legs weren't quite ready for those park days, so we ended up renting the stroller, and they're great, but they're not comfortable, especially if your child is even younger and they're in there a longer time and perhaps would like to have a nap. They're not napping very comfortably in those, so that's why we've always taken our own, just for comfort, and so it's something that they're used to. My next tip is going to be about routine. So ever since Paisley was very, very little and we've been going to Florida, we have stuck to her routine that we have at home. So if she would have her breakfast at 7 or 8 o'clock and her lunch at 12 and her dinner at 5, then we would stick to that. If she was on her bottles, which she was back in the beginning, say every 4 hourly, we would stick to that. If she had a bath before bed, we would try and stick to that where we could, or at least try and get her to sleep at the same time she would at home. So easier said than done, especially in the first few days when jet lag is playing a factor, but I would always try and get her to go to sleep at about 7 or 8 o'clock when she was very, very little, and whether that meant going to a quiet area of the park if we were still in the parks and just kind of rocking her or pushing her back on the floor to the stroller with her little blanket, then that's what I would try and do. Most of the time we would go back to the resort and get her to bed at a nice time, and then we'd just chill in the room, because they don't need to be up until super late, and I think if you have them up super late, they're going to then be tired and ratty in the morning. So I personally have always stuck to our routines as much as possible. I know it's different when we're on a holiday and that's not always realistic, but where possible, I do think it helps to stick to routine. It's what that child is familiar with, so yeah, it's always worked for us. In terms of meals, I think I mentioned earlier that we do have quite a picky eater. Paisley's a picky eater. The Disney parks and resorts are really quite accommodating. If you're in a sit-down restaurant and your child really one thing, perhaps the staff and cast members are really helpful. So Paisley, for example, wouldn't eat pasta if it had red sauce on it, and a lot of the pasta at Disney has red sauce on it, so we just ask for it plain, and they're absolutely fine to do that. I remember when we stayed at the Grand Floridian once back in the day, she was going through a very fussy stage and she just wanted mashed potato, and not a lot of quick services did mashed potato, but we had to work with the cast member in Gasparilla's Island Grill, and they were able to get us a little portion of mashed potato most days. Like whenever we went there and asked for it, they'd nip next door and get it from the Grand Floridian cafe. So they're very, very friendly, very accommodating. So if you do need something to be made plain or something maybe a little bit different, don't be afraid to ask, because they are very, very helpful. We would also always try and factor in a little bit of pool time into our routine, just because that's what Paisley loved to do. And I know it may not be top of the list of things to do at Walt Disney World or when you're on holiday in Florida, but if you're with a little kid and walking past the swimming pool all the time, they just want to go in. So we would always factor time in for that. We'd quite often do it late afternoon and then before dinner, bath and bed, because it would kind of wind her down from being in the parks where it's all quite overstimulating and very, very fun. It would help her wind down for the evening and tire her out to get a nice good night's sleep. So the pools are also amazing on site at Disney and Universal. I've not had much experience off site, but they're very, very fun. And of course, the last section that I want to talk about is the parks themselves. So the main thing that we haven't even really spoken about yet is the days you'll spend at the park with your family. And let me tell you guys, they're the most precious days ever. Going to these parks with my daughter has been the most precious thing. It's like a dream come true, and I've loved every second. But that doesn't mean it can't be tricky at times. So again, preparation is absolutely key, and knowing your facts before you get there. So the kind of things that you may want to look into is the rides. So get to know each park. There are maps available online, there are ride lists, they all have the height requirements, they all have kind of like the thrill level and who they might be appropriate for. So just familiarize yourself. There are rides for everybody in all the parks. So there's rides that tiny babies can even go on, like sitting in your arms. There are lots and lots of rides for toddlers and a lot of family fun that can be had together. In terms of the bigger rides and more thrilling rides, Disney and Universal offer a rider or parent swap. So do your research on that to save both parents or both adults in your party having to queue for the full time. You can utilise that service. So read up on it depending on which park you're going to, and definitely make use of that service. It's been very, very rare for us to get through every attraction at the parks on each trip. So if it's perhaps your first time, or if you haven't been for a while, then be sure to think about which rides you want to experience the most and make your like top to-do list. So perhaps if things don't go to plan and you're not in the parks as long as you want to be, which often can happen when you've got small children and they need to go back to the room to chill out or what have you, at least you will know that the things you have been most looking forward to, or the things that your child has most been looking forward to, you've accomplished that day. And then there's always next time to do the rest. In terms of characters, we've always been really, really lucky in that Paisley has liked them, and that may be because she was introduced to them at that very young age, or it may just be her, I don't know. But what I do know is that not all children, especially toddler kind of ages, they don't always like the characters. We've seen it. We've seen parents be so excited to take their little kid in the line and to meet this character, and the child has taken one look at Pooh Bear or whoever it was and just been like, no, and cried, and they've had to be taken out. So perhaps ease them into it. Find a character that you know they really like, that they're familiar with. They may have seen them on TV or have a teddy, and take them to meet them with low expectations. They might not love it. They may look a bit confused to start with, but ease them in. Some children might prefer face characters to fur characters, so the princesses are a good place to start if that's what your child prefers. And yeah, just know that it's not always smooth sailing with the characters. They are amazing. They're used to kids. Obviously, they're with them all day, every day, meeting and greeting. So they're not going to come in and give them a great big hug if the kid's not looking like they want to do that. They may just play peekaboo if it's a little kid, or just wave from a distance if your child doesn't want to go perhaps too close. They're really good. But yeah, just know that it may not be that dream moment that we all want to see. Probably the top tip within this video is to make use of the baby care centres at Walt Disney World. So there's one at each park. In Magic Kingdom, it's over by First Aid, down between Casey's and the Crystal Palace. In Epcot, it's kind of around the back of Test Track, as though you're heading into World Showcase on the Mexico side. In Hollywood Studios, it's right at the front of the park by Guest Services, and in Animal Kingdom, it's just down near Starbucks off to the side of Discovery Island. They're all on the maps. They are all quite easy to find, and they're amazing. They are a big open space. Some of them are bigger than others. The Animal Kingdom one is really, really good. And they have things such as changing facilities, they have restrooms, they have high chairs, microwaves. Some of them, if not all of them, had a little TV showing cartoons, reading books. There are private little booths within the baby care centres for mothers who are breastfeeding, and there's even shops. So if you need formula or a snack or a dummy, like we've had to buy a dummy before, anything like that, they have it there, and it's really, really good. And they're air conditioned. And just even if your child wants to just, like if it's a toddler and you don't want them crawling around outside, or if it's a very busy day in the parks and you kind of just want to sit down and get away from it all for 5 minutes, the baby care centres are a great place to do that. As Paisley got a little bit older, we would perhaps take her in there and she'd just sit in the chair and have her snack and cool down and calm down. We'd get her changed, get her freshened up. If we need to change her outfit, you can go and do that in there. They are like a gem, a hidden gem for parents in the theme parks. Really, really good. As your kids get a little bit older, it's good to know that there are play areas or playgrounds in each of the parks as well. Well, most of the parks. So in Magic Kingdom, you've got a big indoor air-conditioned play area within the Dumbo queue line. And then over by Dumbo and the Casey Junior train, there's a great big splash pad outside for them to play in as well, which is so much fun. There is also a super fun play area with caves and things like that for adventurers over on Tom Sawyer's Island. In the Magic Kingdom, you've got the Boneyard, which is really, really good. It's for probably a little bit older kids than babies and toddlers, but Paisley loves it and has done for years. It's got a massive sand pit where they can dig like fossils and everything. That's over in Dino Land, USA. Animal Kingdom also has all of the walking trails around Discovery Island and the Gorilla Trail and everything. So there's a lot of like areas for little kids to perhaps come out of their pram and explore, have a little walk around, have some fun. In Epcot, there is a family play zone in World Celebration. There's also the Seas Aquarium, which is really good for young children to have a run around. There's an interactive area over at Imagination with Figment as well. Epcot also has a lot of space and cool areas in the World Showcase within all the different pavilions for kids to have a look around and learn and look at interesting items. All the merchandise is different. Paisley always liked the China Pavilion, which had the I don't know what it's called, but it's a puppet and it's a really fluffy bird. I'll try and find a picture and you walk it along like that. She always loved looking at those. And they do a game called Kidcot as well, so ask a cast member about that because it can be really interesting for children who are perhaps a little bit older than a toddler to learn and to look around the World Showcase and feel more involved, because the World Showcase, although getting better with Frozen and Ratatouille, it's a long old walk around and there aren't that many rides, so that's definitely something to consider getting them involved in. Hollywood Studios doesn't have a play area anymore, but there is a big open area down in the Pixar section where all the Incredibles things are, and also over near Lightning McQueen's Race Academy. There's a lot of room for running around and there's the cars to look at and everything like that as well. So bear those areas in mind because they're always good to let off some steam for little kids. That is everything from me in today's video. I really hope that some of these tips, or even just one of these tips, will help you and your family with your planning and hopefully make your trip with children that little bit easier. We all know that the happier your child is, the more fun they're having, the more comfortable and relaxed they are in this new environment, the happier the adults are going to be, and everybody's just going to have a better time, which is what we want. These holidays are expensive, so anything to make them go swimmingly is great. Do let me know if you've enjoyed this video. Leave me a comment down below, and if you have any questions specifically, feel free to reach out on Instagram or drop me an email. I'm always happy to help. Thank you so much for watching. Have an awesome vacation if you are currently planning. Take care everybody, and I'll see you real soon. Bye guys.